Welcome. This is a quick review for the CER in Linkit that is about the parallelogram properties. So to review, let me back up a little bit more here. To review, a parallelogram by definition has two opposite sides that are congruent and two opposite sides that are parallel. And these are examples of our parallelograms: rectangles, squares, parallelograms, of course, rhombus. Those are all parallelograms because they have two sides that are parallel to each other and two sets of sides that are congruent to each other. Because of this, there are four properties that go along with parallelograms. Opposite sides are congruent, opposite angles are congruent, consecutive angles are supplementary, and diagonals bisect each other. And so we had said at the time, one of these things is kind of not like the other when we're looking at these properties. This one right here, consecutive angles are supplementary, is the only one where you have to add things up and set it equal to 180. All of the other properties, you're setting your expressions equal to each other because they're congruent. Opposite sides congruent, opposite angles congruent, diagonals bisect each other means they are congruent. So I'm going to fast forward down to one of our CER practices that we did together in class and go over it. However, there's a full review up in the course in the parallelogram section, as well as the CER review section. There's also the class recordings that are available. You could get them through Class Connect, and if you're not sure which ones to listen to or which one might be the best one, please just let me know and I will find it for you. But let's go ahead and do one together, and if you could do this one, then you're ready for the CER. Okay. So I'm going to go ahead and, like I did with the last recording, if you listen to it, I'm going to block out this information so we could look at each part one at a time. Alrighty, and so we want to take a look at our image. We have an image of a parallelogram, and the question this time is saying, hey, you have a parallelogram. That means that I could use those four properties that we just reviewed. If I look at the picture of my parallelogram, they're giving me opposite angles. And up here, they're asking me for the measure of angle J. Angle J is 2V minus 84. So we need to figure out what V is before we could figure out what the angle is. Since they're giving me opposite angles, one of those four properties is that opposite angles are congruent. And so that's the one I'm going to use to solve. And so the first thing you want to do with the CER is your evidence, which is all of your calculations. And so if we go over here to the calculation section, I'll just uncover the whole thing. This first line here, I'm going to highlight it. That is your equation. Because opposite angles of a parallelogram are congruent, you could set them equal to each other. So 2V minus 84 is equal to V plus 16, and that is my first equation. Once I'm done there, I have to solve. And so I've subtracted V from both sides. That gives me V minus 84 is equal to 16. Now I want to add 84 to both sides because it's subtracted on this side. Remember, you have to do the opposite to get rid of it. And so if I add 84 over here, 84 minus 84 is 0, it's gone. And then 16 plus 84 is 100. And so I solved for V is 100, but I'm not done yet because the question is, what is the measure of angle J? So again, angle J is 2V minus 84, so I started with that. Plugged in 100 where I saw V, and then solved. So my final answer is 116. So the measure of angle J is 116 degrees. Again, The problem is telling me I have a parallelogram, and therefore I could use the 4 properties. The one I'm using here is that opposite angles are congruent, and therefore I could set them equal to each other and then solve. Once I'm done solving for the variable, I need to plug it back in and solve for the angle that they're asking for. And so my final answer is 116. So now I want to go up and write my claim statement. It should be the first sentence that appears in your answer. Even though you're doing your evidence first, you should then go back up above your evidence and write in your claim statement. It should be in sentence form. You don't want to just write angle J equals 116. You want to write it out with words. And so that's what I've done here. The measure of angle J is 116 degrees. So again, that gives you full credit for the claim, full credit for the evidence, and now we're down to the reasoning. This is vocabulary, content that we learned in class. In this case, we're talking about a parallelogram. That word should appear in your answer. The properties of a parallelogram, that should appear in your answer, right? The reasoning is everything you use to solve. So I'm going to uncover what I shared with you in class. These are the things that should appear in your reasoning. What is the image? Make that statement that you have a parallelogram. Otherwise, you can't use those properties, right? So what are you looking at? What property did you use to solve? In my case, I used that opposite angles are congruent. There's 4 different properties. Whatever one you use, that's the one you want to put in your reasoning. I used that property of a parallelogram, that opposite angles are congruent, and therefore I was able to write this equation that I started off with here. Because opposite angles are congruent, I could set them equal to each other. And then maybe a little bit about how you solved. What did you do? Kind of pull it all together like I had mentioned in the last video. It's kind of your conclusion paragraph like you would write in English class. Pull it all together. Make that final statement. Include vocabulary. Include the content. In our case, include parallelograms. Include the properties of the parallelograms that you used to solve. And that's it. And so the best way, I think, to make sure you have all 3 parts when you go in to write your CER is write CER right into your answer and make sure you have something written next to each one. And so again, to recap, you want to do your evidence first, all of your calculations, then go back up and write your claim statement with your final answer. And then your reasoning is your vocabulary, your explanations, what we've learned in class, in this case, parallelograms, properties of parallelograms, and kind of tie it all together. If you have any questions, please let me know. Again, there's a full review up in the course in both the parallelogram and CER review sections. If you need some help finding recordings, just let me know. Or if you need, again, any of my help, please let me know. Thank you.